You're listening to the Sustainable Angler, and my daddy's the host.
All right, well, special thanks to my sweetheart for the introduction, and welcome to the Sustainable Angler, the podcast where we discuss the intersection of fishing, conservation, and sustainability. I'm your host, Rick Crawford. Today's episode is a special one, a first ever crossover collaboration with another podcast. I'm joined by Dr. Elizabeth Fly, the Director of Resilience and Ocean Conservation at the Nature Conservancy and host of Conversing with Nature podcast. In this conversation, we dig into some of the most essential and frankly urgent topics facing our coasts and our communities. We kick things off with climate change and ocean acidification, and then break down what nature-based solutions actually are, along with real-world examples like living shorelines and rain gardens. Elizabeth shares insights on ecosystem resilience, climate impacts on South Carolina's coasts, and what sea level rise, stronger hurricanes, heavier rainfall, droughts, and urban heat mean for the places we love. We also talk about sustainable business, the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance, and Emerger Strategy's new service, Nature Strategy and Science-Based Targets for Nature. Finally, Elizabeth takes us inside some of her fascinating climate research. This episode was an absolute blast to record and is full of valuable takeaways for conservationists, business leaders, anglers, and anyone who cares about the future of our coastal communities. I hope you enjoy the conversation just as much as we enjoyed making it. And before we dive into the interview, I just want to say thank you. I'm truly grateful that you take the time to listen to this podcast. I hope these conversations inspire you to take action for nature. If you're enjoying the show, a quick free way to support it is by leaving a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The Sustainable Angler is available anywhere you listen to podcasts and is also airing Saturdays at 2 p.m. on Charleston's first and only community-supported radio station, OHM Radio 96.3 FM. This episode of the Sustainable Angler podcast is brought to you by Emerger Strategies and A New Earth Project, the sustainability initiative of Atlantic Packaging. Fishing taught me that everything in nature is interconnected. Just as a fiddler crab, a tailing redfish, and a marsh ecosystem are connected, so are our businesses and our planet. And we have a vision of businesses and the environment thriving together. Imagine a company that not only champions the sport of fishing, but also leads on climate action and conservation efforts. Products and packaging that are friendly to marine life and that degrade harmlessly back into the earth. It's not a dream, it's a strategy, and that's what we do at Emerger Strategies. We guide businesses on their sustainability journey by helping them measure and improve the sustainability performance of their operations, products, and packaging, all while boosting profits. Because when nature thrives, we all thrive. Together, we can make a difference for generations to come. Visit our website at emergerstrategies.com. Let's protect what we love together.
We set out with a New Earth project to really start a movement.
It's a global coalition of people who are deeply concerned and want to accelerate the transition away from problematic packaging to more sustainable solutions.
Our entire value proposition was built on helping companies package things better. We were doing sustainability before sustainability was cool. We just called it packaging optimization. And packaging optimization really is about using less. And We built our whole business on that. People send us their products, their goods, and we help them design packaging systems and solutions for the least possible cost, utilizing the least amount of material. Use less is always the right answer.
And that's what I see with companies like a New Earth Project is it's like, we're just trying to create solutions for big companies and small, that makes it easier for them, cheaper for them, whatever it is, and then has less impact. Not just trying to tell people you should have less impact and making the choice forced on them. Like, make it better for everybody, and it'll make it better for the whole world.
We see the problem, and we are with you.
Hi, everybody. We have a really special episode today. My name's Liz Fly. I'm with the Nature Conservancy, and I'm here with Rick Crawford of Emerger Strategies. Hi, Rick.
Hey, how's it going? Excited
Good.
for this special episode.
Yeah, so we both have podcasts, and they run along similar themes. And so we figured we would try to do a podcast collab here and interview each other and see how this goes. So
Yeah, we're just trying to give the people what they want.
give the people what they want. Yeah. And you've interviewed a number of people that I had wanted to get. So I'm glad you've done that. So we clearly are interested in some of the same topics. And I'm really very excited to talk to you today.
I likewise, because like I have the my sort of approach with I'm more in like the sustainable business world, I guess, and like, but I'm always like I'm like a science nerd at heart, so like I'm always like looking to people like you for like, I was like, well, these are the people who really understand all this. I'm just like an imposter out here trying to do different things for businesses, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I am very excited to talk to a real expert about some of the stuff that I'm interested in.
Well, I think you're getting to be a real expert as well. And I always want to be like, I hate the excuse of, well, I'm not a scientist, so I can't, talk about X, Y, or Z. I'm like, yes, you can. So
Yeah.
and you're a good example of that. So
Oh, well, thanks.
well, Rick, do you want to introduce yourself and your business and your podcast?
Sure. Yeah. So for everyone out there who I've not met or anything like that, my name's Rick Crawford, and I am the president of Emerger Strategies. We are a sustainable business consultancy that works with a lot of fishing and outdoor brands. And we help those companies make the business case for sustainability. So we help them measure and improve their sustainability performance and tie those to real business outcomes, such as reduced cost, increased customer loyalty, mitigated risks, compliance. So that's the sort of the high-level overview of Emerger Strategies. And then I also have a podcast that tens of people listen to called The Sustainable Angler. And because of my focus, I'm an angler, I guess, probably first and foremost. And so that's why I started going after companies in the fishing industry, like brands.
Okay.
So the sustainable angler was just kind of like an extension of being like, oh, okay, yeah, well, we can talk about some of the issues facing businesses, fisheries, conservation, and just sort of a platform to hopefully educate anglers about what's going on and how they can take action.
I love it. How long have you had Emerger Strategies?
9 years. It'll be 10 years next year.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. So it's kind of the, I don't know if it makes sense to tell the 30,000 foot view story, but
Go for it.
So I grew up in Savannah, Georgia, and went to college there. And after college, it was 2008. It was the Great Recession, had nothing better to do. So I took a job out in Wyoming working at a guest ranch.
Cool.
Um, yeah, and that ended up being pretty life-changing in a couple of ways. I met my wife that summer working at that ranch. I got introduced to fly fishing that summer working at that ranch. And I read Let My People Go Surfing by Patagonia founder Yvon Chouinard that summer at that ranch. And so it was my life changed that summer. And I grew up fishing, but I really came a little perhaps unhealthily obsessed with fly fishing. The but what I really liked about it, which I'd never learned about aquatic insects, right, and entomology, is that after studying sustainability, that's actually a great crash course in systems thinking. And so you start to understand the different life cycle stages of bugs, how to read a river, realize that that's all connected to this river ecosystem, and we're all connected through our daily activities and businesses and everything. So, so that's how things kind of got started. So I got interested in sustainability. I didn't know how to start a career in that. So I stayed out west for a few years and installed solar panels and decided that I didn't necessarily want to do that for a living. And I went back to school, got an MBA in sustainable business. As it turns out, you do have to pay the student loans back. So I had to get a real job. And I moved I was living out in Jackson Hole at the time, and I took a job in my hometown working at a biodiesel manufacturing startup, just trying to get a job in sustainability. And they went out of business after a year after I had been there. So that brought me to Charleston, where I am today. And I took a job working at a green building software startup who less promptly went out of business after 3.5 years. So that's when I launched Emerger Strategies, was to try and marry my two passions, which were fly fishing and sustainability, and was just like, if I could figure out a way to marry those two, that would kind of be my dream job. And I guess it worked out. So pretty lucky.
Yeah. Kudos to you going for it. That's impressive. I don't think I have that entrepreneur like streak in me.
No, yeah, you do. You're a doctor. What are you talking about?
That's about surviving the like, what's that word? I'm losing my head. Surviving the grind of graduate school more than being an entrepreneur.
Well, that's all entrepreneurship is a grind. So,
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Well, I mean, let's hear give me your story. How did you get into doing what you're doing and now with the Nature Conservancy, but how did it all get started for you?
Yeah, well, I've always loved animals. I got my undergraduate degree at University of Puget Sound. Well, I grew up in landlocked St. Louis, Missouri, but ended up over in the Puget Sound for my undergraduate degree and was honored to be able to do research like in the intertidal zone, was studying sea stars and their movement. And I did all this field work in the Puget Sound, and it was beautiful and amazing and incredible. So I kind of knew like marine biology was my passion. But I did spend a year studying monkeys in the jungle of Suriname, which is a country in South America. Many people think Suriname's in Africa, but it's in South America. So studied monkeys there for a year, just to try something different, and wanted to go back to marine biology. So, applied while I was in the jungle in Suriname for graduate school at University of South Carolina, and that's where I ended up, and studied climate change impacts on marine mussels all around the world for my PhD. So got to study their physiology, kind of how they tick, how they work, and then predict their range distributions with changing sea surface temperatures. So kind of predict where they'll be in the future
Really?
with climate change. Yeah. So that was very cool. I will say when I was in the jungle of Suriname, it's a completely different world. People are living completely differently, developing country. And so I knew that I didn't want to just like get my PhD that only maybe like 3 people in the world could really talk to me about, like I didn't want to be that specialized. I wanted to make an impact in the world, I guess. And so, that led me to trying to think more broadly in what I did. So after graduate school, I became a Knaus Marine Policy Fellow. That's a fellowship through NOAA and Sea Grant. So I got to spend a year in Washington, D.C. working on the National Climate Assessment that was coming out at the time. So I helped produce the oceans and coast chapters of the 3rd National Climate Assessment. So at this point, I've like really squared in on oceans and coasts, like pigeonholed myself almost to that kind of work. But and then I ended up back in South Carolina after that, a job with South Carolina Sea Grant. So I was the coastal climate adaptation specialist, and I've gotten to work really closely with like the city of Charleston and Beaufort County and Folly Beach and all these other communities on sea level rise adaptation plans and kind of how are we going to adapt to all these changes we're seeing? I was there for 3.5 years. I'm almost done with my story. And then
No, I'm so jealous of of everything that you've done. This is like awesome.
I've been very lucky. Yes, it's been very fun. Ended up shifting to the Nature Conservancy after about 3.5 years. Came on as a marine conservation director, but because of my like background in resilience, I really have, I think, built that program out for us in South Carolina, honing in on how do we use nature-based solutions to help with flood risk mitigation and, other mitigating impacts from climate change. So, so that's where I've been for 8.5 years now. And my title has expanded to Director of Resilience and Ocean Conservation. We're trying to kind of capture, both sides because we do a lot of oceans work. Of course, that, spans more than just South Carolina, but try to do some work on fisheries and, offshore wind, if that's happening, all that sort of stuff. And then really statewide on like resilience and nature-based solutions.
Wow. I have like a million questions to ask you. Okay. That's awesome. What a background. I feel like this is just so up my alley. Couple of things. Let me start with this.
Okay.
So little known fact, I kind of like have my little like intro story that I give, my little spiel, which I just did. But I don't ever mention that I worked while I was living in Jackson Hole for Wyoming Game and Fish.
Oh, cool.
And one summer, I did this, and we were our title was, me and my buddy, aquatic invasive species technicians.
Okay.
So what that means is we were inspecting all the boats that were coming into summer in Jackson Lake for zebra mussels.
Yes, of course.
So that's my mussel connection aside from living in the Southeast. But your studies, okay, so this is like one of the climate impacts that I have said a lot, but I'm like, would love to get your take with a little bit more information. Ocean acidification affects, I assume, animals like mussels, but oysters and other crustaceans, if that's the right word. Their ability to form shells, right? Am I right in that?
Yep. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Sorry, was there a follow-up question to that?
Well, I was just going to say, like, I just realized that I kind of had a closed-in question there. So, so if that is correct, like, what did your studies or findings? What did you discover through studying mussels with that?
Well, so I didn't look specifically at ocean acidification, but for my studies, but you're right that that's a huge issue for any creature that tries to grow an exoskeleton with calcium in it. So in the United States, I know that there are a lot of ocean acidification issues on the West Coast right now, and have been for a couple decades. a lot of the upwelling that happens out there drives to more ocean acidification issues on that side. On the East Coast, we're not having those issues yet. It's not to say we won't, but they are seeing impacts on the shell growth of oysters, in particular, I know of out there on the West Coast. And it's definitely something we're probably going to have to be concerned about at some point. But we've kind of been buffered by that, buffered from ocean acidification here on the East Coast. And off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly why, but yeah, it is definitely an issue.
Yeah. I kind of have heard that, but that's one of those ones where it's kind of hard, I feel like, to provide real examples. It's almost like it's just like, this is something that is going to happen. You got to wait,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. You talk to oyster growers on the West Coast and they'll tell you all about it because it's a big issue.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it's even like affected oyster, when they're growing, the tiny little baby spat, and like the oyster farms out there, they've got to really monitor the water because they'll have die-offs. Yeah.
Wow. Well, what about, you mentioned now sort of your focus is like nature-based solutions. What does that mean for the folks out there who may not be familiar with that?
Sure. Depends how you want to. You've probably heard, some people have heard green infrastructure, some people have heard nature-based solutions, or natural infrastructure, or natural and nature-based features, even low impact development, right? There's like a lot of terms for essentially the same thing, but it's essentially utilizing nature or things that mimic nature and nature's functions to help us, mitigate impacts of something. So, for example, flooding. So, on a small scale, it could be a rain garden or a bioswale that helps absorb excess stormwater rather than just running it off into a pipe immediately, or storing it, slowing it down, filtering out the pollutants, and then it's slowly moving into pipes or, waterways. Big scale could be created wetlands in an area, or you might have heard of like thin layer placement that helps with marsh restoration in estuaries. And, some people even up to like land protection. Just protecting acres and acres of land is a nature-based solution because you're, protecting land, and then that's leading to better water quality and all those things for people. So that's kind of the very high level definition.
Yeah. And is oyster shell restoration projects, is that considered a nature-based solution, or is that technically something different?
Yeah. So I would say like a living shoreline, which does not always have to be oyster based, but particularly in South Carolina is very often oyster based, is 100% a living shore, or is 100% a nature based solution, right? Instead of a seawall, we're using a more natural solution. Restoring oyster reefs just for the sake of restoring oyster reefs, I think that's one of those things where I would probably still call that a nature-based solution. It's like, what's the final outcome of any of these things? But all of them are benefiting people and nature, so I put them all under that umbrella, I think.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Well, what about while we're talking about definitions, tell me, what is your definition of sustainability? Because I feel like that's another one that can be huge, but I also feel like sometimes there are really specific definitions for what that means.
Yeah, so the first definition of sustainability was the 1987 Brundtland Report, and they defined sustainable development as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
Okay.
You
just rattled that off. That was good.
I've had to say that one a lot. Yeah, I've got that one memorized. But from a business context, what that means, which is what we do at Emerger Strategies, is we help companies understand their triple bottom line. So as historically, a company is only concerned with their economic bottom line, right? Are they profitable or not? And what we do is help them put KPIs between their social and environmental bottom lines that can impact their economic bottom line.
I think you need to define KPIs for people.
Key performance indicators.
Okay.
So, for example, I'll give you a real world example that's South Carolina based. Z-Man Fishing Products. They make soft plastic fishing lures for the most part, and they manufacture right here, right outside of right outside of Charleston. So I was hired to do a sustainability assessment of their business. And so I go through and just ask them a bunch of questions related to their operations, their products, their packaging, supply chain. And through that process, we collected data, their energy consumption data. And so annual kilowatt hours and therms of natural gas that they were using, and they're a 24/7 manufacturing operation. And through that, I was able to kind of go, "God, like y'all really consuming a lot of electricity, and you're also paying a lot for it." They were paying $80,000 a year basically for their power. So I had recommended that they explore, aside from energy efficiency initiatives and solar. In their case, they owned the building that they were in. They had a flat roof, so that's optimal for solar. Installed solar panels, and they eliminated their power bill while reducing their carbon footprint. And so that's an example of sustainable business, right? You find the win-win to say, okay, well, we're going to make this investment in solar. This is going to reduce our operating expenses, and it's going to reduce our carbon footprint. And so that is what sustainability in a business context means. And you can do the same thing with waste. So a lot of times you can find buyers for companies' wastes, so they can create a new revenue stream selling their waste instead of sending it to the landfill.
Okay.
You can also, work on things in the design phase, just design things so that they're less wasteful. But to put it in a business context, waste equals squandered corporate assets. Anything that is waste, you paid for it. Like
Yeah.
and then you're going to send it. So like in a manufacturing example, let's say that you're manufacturing widgets, whatever that is, right? And you have to buy inputs to make it. And let's say that 20% of the inputs end up going to the landfill because you don't need it because of your process. Well, you literally are throwing money away. And so the business angle from it is to say, well, how can we do this at optimal efficiency, right? And so to kind of tie it to nature and everything that you do, right? There's no waste in nature.
Yeah.
So it's like so that's kind of what I try and do is working with these businesses is to help them understand, like, we need to design systems that replicate nature.
Yeah.
Right? So there is not waste there. Their energy, right, it comes from the sun, like through solar or from wind, right? And so those are naturally occurring things that happen in nature, and that we should mimic those. Versus Bill McKibben was just in town, and
Yeah, I was there.
yeah, he had the best line ever. It was like energy from heaven instead of hell, for renewable energy versus fossil fuels, which I thought was pretty awesome. But
It was.
But yeah, that's kind of just to provide a couple little examples. That's what sustainability in a business context means.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I love that, Rick. That I get really excited about what you do, because I'm like, I mean, that's what's needed. And I wish we could have like all businesses, going all in on that sort of thing. How do you get clients, businesses? I mean, have you had like a lot of interest in this, or you've made it a sustainable business, obviously, right?
Yeah. I have, I still cold call every single day. That's part of my daily routine. But I cold call, I get referrals. I have partnered with some industry trade associations. So American Fly Fishing Trade Association and the American Sport Fishing Association. And what I did for them to try and move more of businesses in this industry is I created sustainability toolkits for their members to say, like, hey, like, a lot of companies just they don't understand how to get started on their sustainability journey is what I
Yeah.
call it. And so it's like, yeah, like, so sustainability, the way I look at it is it's about becoming the best version of your brand. It's no different than a person who strives to whatever it is their personal goals are, right? And become a better version of themselves. I think that's what businesses do that adopt sustainable business practices. And so the problem is, or I guess their challenge is they just don't even know how to get started.
Hmm.
So I built these toolkits that made it easy for them to be like, hey, here are some of the things that you need to do. For example, collect uh, data, right? So collect 12 months of energy data, collect 12 months of waste data, collect 12 months of water data, consumption and cost, so that we have a baseline to start measuring improvements going forward so that we can say, hey, oh, and we'll take that same data for the energy data and use it to measure their operational carbon footprint. So it's like, hey, we're going to get your scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, which we don't have to get into on this. But we're going to take your operational carbon footprint. We're going to have a baseline to measure it, and then we're going to start taking steps through energy efficiency where you're going to see a reduction in your cost and you're going to see a reduction in your carbon footprint. And the easiest thing that any business can do that's listening, as far as low hanging fruit, is to make the switch to LED lights. That's like a guaranteed minimum 10% reduction in your energy bill. And so that's going to help hedge rising energy costs. When you start to incorporate things like solar, you're getting to a place where you're potentially eliminating, depending on size.
Yeah.
But anyway, that is how I have grown the business, was to kind of work with individual companies, but then also work with trade groups where we can influence entire industries to say, hey, if you all did these things, like we could really reduce this into whole industry's carbon footprint, for example.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And now it does take some, level of capital to take the first step, right? And do these things. And I figure that's, sometimes why people to do that or companies, don't want to do that initially, even if they maybe know about the return of investment. But, because you're you clearly articulate that ROI so that they will make that initial investment.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty simple. It's like, do you plan on going out of business in the next 10 years? No. Do you own your building? No. Okay. Well, do you want to pay more or less for your power? It's to overly simplify it. Solar typically has a payback period of like 6 or 7 years. So, the whole argument is of, like, I could understand maybe why a homeowner might be hesitant to be like, well, I may sell my house and I don't know how, do I want to, it's like, okay, well, if you're a business owner and you've been in business for a while and you own the building and you don't plan on going out of business or moving, then I think it's worth considering.
Yeah.
And in a lot of cases it works. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it's too much shade, or the building is not oriented in the right way. South facing is best. So, but so let me turn the tables on you.
Okay.
Because we have sort of defined what sustainability means to me, but what does coastal resilience mean? What is dive into that for the folks out there?
Sure. Another definition that's so broad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the way I look at resilience, again, just almost like you described the triple bottom line, like there's so many facets of resilience. But I think we would start with, gosh, I don't know. I don't have my 30-second definition for resilience. I mean, it's really how systems, ecosystems, or community people systems can kind of respond to stressors, chronic stressors, or, immediate disasters, and kind of grow back both stronger and smarter. Smarter's, more important than just stronger. And so, but, so we think about ecosystem resilience. I mean, nature is inherently resilient. Nature doesn't have waste. Nature will kind of always find its way to come back. But we can certainly help give it a little bit of a leg up, particularly when we humans have impacted it, we can then help give it kind of a leg up to find that resilience again. And community resilience, people resilience, that's where there's so many facets. There's economic resilience, there's the social cohesion and resilience, there's mobility resilience, so many things. But I think it's critically important that we're thinking holistically when we are thinking about resilience. So like maybe my focus is, the nature-based solutions for flood mitigation, but that's going to feed into, a more resilient community in the end. Yeah. So that was my really terrible definition of resilience.
Well, no, I mean, I what I took away from it was like, how can we help take a beating and keep going?
Keep going, right? Yeah.
Without quitting. So resilient, right? You can take a beating and keep going.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the scientific definition is like a spring, right? You stretch it out and it snaps back to the same length or whatever. But,
that's a good way to think about it.
But for us, especially with changing conditions, we don't want to just bounce back to where we were, because then we're not going to be prepared for, future impacts. And so it's kind of bouncing back, but to a more resilient state, whatever that looks like. So,
well, so let's talk about, you mentioned impact. So like, what are the climate impacts, for example, that we're facing here on the South Carolina coast?
Yeah, well, the biggest one everyone talks about is sea level rise. We've seen about a foot of sea level rise along the Charleston Harbor, South Carolina coast in the last 100 years, and they expect that pace to double. So in the next 50 years, we're going to be looking about the same. So that's concerning, and that the way we see that on the ground are through what we call sunny day flooding, or those super high king tides. So that's when, our roads and our yards are flooded even when there's no rain. It's just a super high tide. We're seeing those more and more frequently. And then when we happen to have rainfall the same time as those super high tides, those that live around here know that the city has to shut down essentially. And then you've got, hurricanes, which are not necessarily happening more often, but they're becoming more intense. And so when you put that on top of sea level rise, that's greater storm surge and bigger issues there. We're seeing more intense rainfall. So, put all that together and it's just a lot more water happening at one time. So that's kind of the water issues. Then, of course, there's heat issues. We have a lot of kind of urban heat impacts. And then we're seeing droughts as well. We're kind of seeing the, swinging back and forth of super wet and then super dry. So some of the main ones.
Well, what is, so how do the tools like living shorelines and oyster reefs and all that marsh restoration, how does that help protect our coastlines and communities?
Yeah. Well, so one of the main impacts of sea level rise and more storm surge and just scouring along our shoreline is greater erosion along our shoreline. So the entire South Carolina coast, more than 50% of it is eroding, which means washing away. So a lot of people want to armor their shoreline. I mean, if they, happen to own property along the coast, and so typically that's been seawalls or bulkheads or hard infrastructure, but those actually cause more erosion. Because if you think about it, you've got a hard seawall, you've got waves just bouncing on that hard seawall, and then scouring, the ground around it. So while a living shoreline or oyster reef is a more natural, more sloped, natural connection between land and water. So, if we can use more of these natural options, we're going to enhance the marsh, enhance our shoreline and stop that erosion. Living shorelines and things are not going to save you from, storm surge coming in. Obviously, those just get swamped at that point. But for the more kind of long-term chronic stressors of erosion, That's a big one. And then, for example, if you move inland, we've got a lot of properties that flood repetitively, and home buyouts is a big thing, voluntary home buyouts. And so, for example, in Conway, South Carolina, the city bought out a number of homes there on a 8-acre lot that flooded a lot. This was because of Crabtree Swamp up there. The hydrology is all messed up. Lots of flooding, and so we helped design a created wetland in the place of where those homes were demolished. So now that created wetland will be able to handle, that flashiness of that flooding coming through and manage that stormwater and mitigate the flooding and the houses that do remain, and a big church. If anyone's seen pictures of Conway flooding, they've seen Trinity United Methodist Church underwater. It's like the poster child of flooding in Conway. So that's right next to the site. So hopefully this will help.
Wow. Well, I can tell you firsthand that I have experienced sunny day flooding, as I'm sure many Charlestonians have. My daughter, they both technically, one of them is no longer there, but they go to a daycare downtown or at a church, and like multiple times, I can't tell you. I mean, I don't know, at least a dozen times I've had to get rerouted unexpectedly because I was like, oh, it's not like when it rains and it's high tide. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get rerouted. But like sunny day, I've been rerouted. I'm like, what?
Yeah, what's going on?
Yeah, like are you kidding? Like today?
I know, it's like
pretty insane.
It's like a way of life in Charleston to check both the tides and the rain forecast every day, so you know where to go.
For sure. I mean, and anecdotally, when I redfish on the flats, I have noticed that, and this is taking into account, like I know if the wind is blowing, the tides, if it's a north wind, we're going to get a little bit, bigger tides than normal, that kind of stuff. The tide charts are off.
Yeah.
Because there's just more water. Where I'm like, I fish, there's flats near where I live that I go on my kayak. And so I know the area pretty intimately. I've been fishing them for like 12 years since I've lived here. And I'm like, this was calling for a 5'9". Like this water is way more water than that.
Yeah.
So yeah, just anecdotally, I've noticed those things too.
Those strong winds will really adjust your tide for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. Super frustrating when we want to go out and build a living shoreline or something and the tide just doesn't go down that day. It's like, come on. Well, yeah, you've got one of your, products, I guess, is science-based targets for nature. Is that right? I saw that on the website.
Yeah.
What does that mean? Tell me about that.
So this is a brand new service that we're offering. And basically, if anyone is a sustainable business nerd out there who is familiar with the Science-Based Target Initiative, that is essentially using science, right? The science says we want to try and limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And what SBTI does is they help companies set. So if your goal is net zero by 2050, and you're trying to stay within the 1.5 degree threshold, they provide targets for your company to achieve so that you can achieve net zero by 2050.
Okay.
So to simplify it, it's a framework. And so this is very similar to that. This is science-based targets for nature. But instead of just focusing on climate, this is also understanding your company's impact on nature from your operations, but also your value chain.
Okay.
So it's looking at ocean, it's looking at freshwater, it's looking at land, it's looking at climate, it's looking at biodiversity. And so they provide, and by they, it's the Science-Based Target Network, SBTN.
Okay.
If you live in the world of sustainability, you get used to acronym soup. So, but SBTN is providing the tools, and I have just recently gone through some training, and I'm trying to work with companies to understand their impacts on nature that they're not accounting for. They may not even have any idea. And so what that does for them, it helps them better understand the risks of their suppliers. So, for example, one of my clients, we used, for this project, we used the World Wildlife Fund risk filter suite, and we're able to map out their suppliers and look at biodiversity risk and water risk for where their suppliers operate so that they can start make better informed decisions about, hey, like, one of our suppliers is in like a very high risk area for biodiversity, and they sell forest products. And so you're going, well, this is not good, right? Like they're in a high risk area. That's not good for your business. That could impact your business. How can we address this? And how can we do what's right for nature and for your business so that you're making better business decisions that are better for nature, essentially?
That's so important to think about the supply chain. And I mean, I'm not in the business world, so I don't think about that at all, but just the ramifications down the chain. Yeah.
Well, I mean, just think like, it's so for a carbon footprint, for example, if I measure that for a business, we're looking at their operations. That's scope 1 and scope 2. I said we wouldn't do this, but I'm gonna just
I took you there. All right.
But scope 3 is your value chain, so it's upstream and downstream, right?
Okay.
So your scope 3 is let's use this example. I am a brand who sells cotton t-shirts, right? And I need to account for not only the manufacturing facility that was making the cotton t-shirts or printing the designs on them. I need to account for the farm where it was grown, the fuel that transported the cotton to somewhere to where it was ginned, and then it was cut and sewn, and then it was turned into a cotton t-shirt, and then it was shipped to me, right? The brand, right? So that I could then ship it out to my customers.
Yeah.
Then you have to think about the end of life of the product, which is for a t-shirt, they found through using life cycle assessment, it's actually the washing machines that are the biggest carbon footprint of t-shirts because they're using a bunch of energy to wash the t-shirts.
Yeah.
So that's a super nerdy thing to talk about, but that's kind of what you can identify hotspots. And for most companies, their scope 3 is 80 to 90% of their carbon footprint.
Okay. That doesn't surprise me when you think about that whole chain of it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's big. And so what's cool about this science-based targets for nature is that rather than just focusing on the emissions from your scope 1, 2, and 3, you're also starting to then think about, well, what is the impact of all this on land and ocean? And so it's more comprehensive, but kind of a natural progression of it's more holistic, right? Instead of just being like, all we need to focus is reduce emissions. It's like, well, yeah, but if we're reducing emissions while simultaneously wiping out forests, that's not good.
Right. That's yeah. And yeah, I mean, the two biggest existential crises we have are climate change and biodiversity loss. So you really can't really impact one without impacting the other.
Well, I heard I'm sure you're familiar with Project Drawdown. And so for anyone who's not, it's like 100 solutions to solve global warming, basically. And I had heard, oh man, now I'm going to blank on his name. Foley, Dr. Foley. He's a climate scientist for Project Drawdown, I guess. Okay. Anyway, he was like, the biggest lever we can pull to hopefully achieve net zero emissions is to prevent deforestation. And so it's like this thing where it's like, right, like, I've been helping companies reduce their emissions, but also like, to what end? Are you also wiping out forests to do it? Because like that can't do both. So anyway, I guess that was my point with that. So anyway, it's
it's do no harm is first, right? Yeah, and we talk about the mitigation hierarchy, which maybe you do as well to some extent, but like number one, do no harm. If you have to do harm, then do it to the least extent possible. If you have to make impacts, then you need to mitigate those impacts somewhere else. Like that's we should be starting with do no harm and then go from there.
Yeah. That should be a good starting point.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, what are some of y'all's projects that you're excited about right now that you're working on from a resilience, conservation, climate adaptation?
Well, we were awarded a grant from NOAA in 2023 through their Transformational Habitat program. We got $6.8 million, which is the biggest award we in South Carolina have ever gotten from NOAA. And there's 3 components to it. So the first one is building a 2,000-foot living shoreline on Marine Corps Air Station Beaufort property right there along the Broad River. This has been a labor of love volunteer effort, and we've been chipping away at it for about a year and a half now, but we are finally halfway done with it. But it's so cool because it's taken so long. Every time you go out there, you see the project working, that we've installed. So there have been feet of sediment that have built up behind the reef we built a year and a half ago. Marsh grass is already growing back in. It's super exciting to see that progression over time. So, and it's been really important to have that relationship with Department of Defense. So that was one of the main reasons we partnered with them and selected that project, was to work on the relationship with DoD. The second component of that grant is very exciting. It's the first ever grant program for helping to install living shorelines in South Carolina. So we're calling it the Living Shoreline Community Assistance Program. And we had an application period where people could apply to the program. And we were targeting, under-resourced communities or homeowners because it's still really expensive, unfortunately, to install a living shoreline on your property. So it's not an option for everybody. So we're trying to open up that opportunity to people who wouldn't necessarily be able to do it. So actually, the application process is still open. It's closing in December. But we had over 70 applications so far for the program.
Wow.
And so we're working on site visits right now and trying to, figure out where we can help, I guess. So that's super exciting. It's a pilot program. We hope, it can live on somewhere. But we're going to do what we can with the money through NOAA.
Yeah. And look, so I'm familiar with that because I think the Sustainability Institute has helped with that.
Yes. Yeah. They've helped with the whole grant. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I'm aware of is NOAA is facing funding problems.
Yeah.
Through the government, which is I like NOAA does
no words. Yeah.
Yes. NOAA does so much for us in South Carolina, and everywhere.
Yeah.
But I'm just that to me is just wild.
Yeah. So we've done an assessment of how much money has come to the state for nature-based solutions. And we initially did an assessment from 2015 to 2020, because we were kind of capturing all of those storms that hit, 2015, 2016, 2018, 2019. So we were specifically looking at post-disaster and pre-disaster funding that came to the state. And in that first period of time, 2015 to 2020, there was essentially $0 going specifically towards nature-based solutions. And I'm quoting for those that can't see me quoting, but we just redid the assessment through 2024, and there's been a crazy investment in nature-based solutions in the state. $113 million has now come to the state on the ground for nature-based projects. That includes housing and Department of Housing, Urban Development, HUD, they send money through their Community Block Development Grant. Talk about acronyms. Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. But they have funding for disaster recovery and for infrastructure mitigation that goes through our Office of Resilience. And some of that has prioritized nature-based solutions. FEMA has a couple programs, pre and post disaster, and some of that has prioritized nature-based solutions. And then there's been the significant investments in the past administration with the bipartisan infrastructure infrastructure law, the BIL, and the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, and ARPA. Oh my gosh, American Rescue Plan Act. And all of those had components that also prioritized resilience or nature-based solutions. So we really wanted to document like that came to the ground. It's hitting the ground. We've got projects, we've got planning, and it's super exciting. And so, I hope that we can find ways to continue funding that work. The outlook for those programs are not as good in the next several years. So it'll be interesting to see if and who, and this is a call out to all those corporations and private funders and foundations out there, to fill the gap that may be, because we need to continue doing this important work in our state.
Yeah, no doubt. I like, and it benefits everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like I've done oyster reef restoration, like volunteer stuff through, and I'm like, I love that because it's stabilizing our shoreline, it's cleaning our water, but it enhances the fishery, and the entire community benefits from that.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing about nature-based solutions is, right, there's multiple benefits. It's not just the one benefit. And it kind of gets to all those facets of resilience or all the facets of sustainability like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. You also started the Fly Fish Climate Alliance.
The Fly Fishing Climate Alliance.
Yeah. I didn't write down the ING. Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. Yeah. Tell me about that.
So I guess it was I have been, since I started the company, trying to get companies to measure and reduce their carbon footprint, because to me it's just like I trust that the scientists who are doing this work are not doing this for any other reason other than the public good. And there is a crazy high consensus amongst peer-reviewed journals and scientists that climate change is mostly happening because we are burning fossil fuels. That means that we have to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So the way that I sort of make peace with myself and the world is to try and do what I can to help companies with that. And I was working with individual fly fishing brands and was like, this is good and it's good for their business. Like, that's great. I was like, but I mean, I'm going to spend the rest of my life picking off fly fishing brands to help them measure. Like, it would just be way easier if we were all working towards a common goal. Mm-hmm. And so I had reached out to some connections and partners that I have in the industry, and with support of brands like Patagonia and Rapture Water and fishing guides and shop owners like Hillary Hutchison, who are Oliver White, like these people that are conservationists and fishing guides and understand the impact that's happening wherever they live. To put this in context, this is not something that's just happening in South Carolina. And out west, they're seeing less snowpack. They're seeing higher stream temperatures during the summer. In Montana, they're actually closing the streams in the afternoons. It's called hoot owl restrictions. And they close the streams in the afternoon because it's the stream temperatures are so high. So like my point is that this is not just something that's happening in Charleston. Like we see sea level rise, but like it's happening everywhere. And so all these it's fishing guides, or fly fishing guides, it's fly shops, it's lodges, brands, and nonprofits. And I just got myself and a colleague, Brooke Scott, we got over 50 members to commit to net zero, and then we provided them with the tools and resources for how to measure that. And awesome. They started companies like the Driftless Angler, which is a fly shop in, I think, Wisconsin. They put solar on the roof of their fly shop, and they cut their scope 2 emissions by 94% as a result of that. And so it's like, to me, if reducing our footprint, I think the secret sauce is nature and businesses which have the biggest impact to reduce their emissions, right? So you need to prevent deforestation. We need to restore, and the work that you do, that's critically important. And then while we're simultaneously working to reduce emissions. And so that was sort of the impetus behind the Fly Fishing Climate Alliance. And now it has kind of more or less, it was never like a nonprofit or anything. It was just an Instagram account and me work, and I built a website for it. And Brooks and I working with these brands to measure and reduce their footprint. But it seems like now what I'm starting to see happen, which is kind of like the merging of these two, of conservation and like climate work, which I think is really exciting. And that's why that science-based targets for nature thing, like that wouldn't have happened if there wasn't SBTI, who got a bunch of global companies to commit to net zero.
Yeah.
And so it's all, I think it's all part of a process, but I think what we're doing is all coming to the realization that we are 100% dependent on healthy ecosystems to survive.
Yes.
So
Yes.
that seems like that should be pretty high up on the priority scale for what we should be spending our time protecting.
Yep. I agree 100%.
Yeah. So, well, let me ping pong here. So I'm curious to know, what are the conditions of South Carolina's coastlines, in terms of what concerns you the most? What are you seeing in the work that you do, in terms of what's most concerning to you?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I mean, compared to like something like the Chesapeake Bay, we have really, compared to that, we have very healthy estuaries. We're very lucky with our natural resources down here. I think I've said it on other episodes, but South Carolina has, 20% of all the salt marsh on the U.S. East Coast. So like,
Wow.
That's the most of any state. We are number one for our salt marsh, and people, move to the coast because of it to some extent, right? It's beautiful, and the vistas and the fishing it provides and all that. And our oyster populations are pretty healthy compared again to other states and places that have been really decimated. That doesn't mean we don't have work to do, right? And to really sustain those issues. And I think people are very good about being reactive and trying to solve a problem once it's a problem. But we work really hard to be proactive about maintaining and making better what we have, rather than getting to the point where we're like, oh crap, there's our oyster population decline we've been waiting for. So, but development is certainly a huge issue. I don't remember the statistics. You might, but like the number of people moving to the coast or to Charleston every day is
wild.
Wild, yeah.
I can't remember what they are the last time I heard, but it was like, I can't even. It's a massive amount of people.
It was something like 50 people a day or something.
I think that's what I remember here.
Yeah. And that's all, but I mean, the majority of our population lives in the coastal areas, and that's similar for the entire country. So there's that coastal squeeze. So you've got the sea level rise, and we're losing marsh from that angle, on that side of things. And then we're losing, upland through development from the other side. So, I think we've, like you're saying, women, we got to kind of approach this from all angles. And I wish that we could be a little bit more smarter in our development. There's ways to develop and still make money, right? And still bring people to a place, but incorporate more resilient methods in doing so, instead of just willy-nilly slapping up all this stuff all over the place. It's that long-term thinking I think we lack a lot.
Yeah, right. And so, and you see developments happening all up and down from here to Myrtle Beach. If you take that drive, I mean, it's happening at a pretty breakneck clip. And so I think we're hopefully getting to a place where we go, well, we probably need to have some type of like spatial scale planning and look at like what's left and what do we want to conserve? Because this is going to be critical if we want to have clean air and clean water and benefit from all these ecosystem services.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's pretty wild to think about.
It is. And my broken record on every episode, I think I say that. I mean, South Carolina does have a really strong conservation ethic.
Yeah, it's in our Constitution.
It's in our Constitution.
Yeah.
And we've had, the holistic, we have protected a lot of land and have a really strong conservation groups, organizations throughout the state. And even, the governor has made it one of his priorities, land protection and conservation. So that's fantastic. And, we just need to keep growing that. But on the flip side, like I said, there are ways to develop, and the business side of things that you're working on, like they both need to be in place to make this work.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not a one size fits all, but it's also like no matter what industry you're in from a business perspective, like you need to start understanding and being more thoughtful and mindful in how you conduct business and understanding like, okay, like is this necessary to do it this way, or can we find and also, the other thing that pops in my head with all this that to go back to Bill McKibben when he like it drives innovation. Like
yes.
America invented solar panels. Like, do people know that? Like we invented it. Like it's like all these amazing innovations and like we invented it. Like so it should be totally American mindset to want to adopt these types of solutions and find new ones.
Yeah.
So it's anyway. I nerd out and I get all excited about that stuff. But that's the. It's just a better way to do business. I'm just saying.
And I love that you're in that space and showing that. It's something that on my side of things, like we have a hard time convincing people to do nature-based solutions because we haven't quite nailed down how to show that ROI, that return on investment. And, so thinking about it like more from a business, angle somehow, I think in my field, we need to be doing that a little bit more.
Well, I think interestingly, I've read an article this morning. I'll send it to you. And I don't know this guy. I just happened to come across on my LinkedIn feed, and it was all about the gap in funding for conservation. But this guy was like as a finance guy, and so it was really interesting to hear his take on it. But it was basically coming to the fact that governments. We need companies, this is going to lead somewhere. Don't worry. We need companies pushing government to enact the incentives and regulations for conservation because the gap in funding for conservation from privately held, from business is. The gap is enormous. Like there's just not enough. And so a question that I have for you from your perspective is, what are some of the policy or regulatory changes would make the biggest difference for coastal or ocean resilience in South Carolina, maybe that you see?
That's a good question. I think especially in South Carolina, a lot of it is local policy and regulations because it's all about home rule and, each city and town having their own ordinances and such. And, so when we talk about development, that goes into zoning and buffers against wetlands and coastal buffers and, and then incentivizing low impact development or nature-based solutions. It's all things that essentially in South Carolina happen at the local level. Would I love to see some statewide regulations on that stuff? I would, but I don't see that really happening in our state. But then the state has heavily invested in the Conservation Bank and land protection through several state agencies. So that's fantastic. And I'm encourage them to continue doing that. And then at the federal level, there's, a whole bunch of, just maintaining what we have, the protections we do have. The ocean we could go another hour on just the ocean in general, or in particular, but the ocean is very different from land in that you can't just buy the ocean. Everyone just pictures like buying a piece of land and then it's protected and great. But the ocean's a public trust. You can't do that. And so you got to work with these regulatory agencies and work through marine protected areas. And, these, for example, spawning special management zones are little areas where are protected from fishing because they're known as these places where these fish go and spawn all together at once and make them very vulnerable. So, anyway, so it's a different beast out in the ocean. Takes a lot more partnerships and I feel like a lot more long time work. Not saying land protection isn't hard, but but there's a lot there as well. Yeah.
Well, some of the things that you talk about a broken record. I say the same. Like I tell that sea level rise story to my daughter, like probably on every podcast. But
I know our avid listeners are like, again, okay.
Yes, we've heard that. But so another broken record thing that I always say that's ocean related is that we're starting to see shifts in migratory patterns of species. So like people are catching snook in Charleston Harbor, and that's happening, at scale. But it just reminded me when you said, the ocean is a public trust, and it's there's a lot of different things going on at the same time. But that's one thing that we're seeing is climate impact, right? Is all these shifts in migratory patterns. Like tarpon are being caught in Rhode Island, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So pretty wild.
It is wild. Yeah. And there's so many interesting ramifications of all of that. Some good. Maybe it'll open up some fishing industry, up north that wasn't there before, right? But then you lose at other places. And that's what hearkening back to the start of our conversation, that's my PhD. There are 3 species of marine mussels. One's a cold water species, one's a temperate species, and one's a warm water species. And that one's considered the invasive species. And so I was tracking the range shifts of those species.
Really?
With climate change, and that warm water invasive mussel is now, in places it never could have survived before. So just interesting to watch those range shifts. It's going to be.
What is it like? Give me an example of like how big is a range? Like, is it?
Well, okay, so I know here on the East Coast, for those familiar, the species of mussel is Middleus edulus. That's the temperate species, and its historic range came all the way down to Cape Hatteras in North Carolina, but it retracted all the way to Lewis, Delaware. So you won't find a mussel essentially south of Lewis, Delaware anymore, when they used to live all the way down in Cape Hatteras. And I'm going to misspeak. I feel like that happened over like a 50-year period, but I would need to double check on that. We do not have the invasive warm water species on the East Coast. So that one hasn't replaced it or anything. It's just shifted. But yeah, it kind of, depends where you are and where the temperatures are in terms of how dramatic these range shifts are. But yeah.
Yeah. But it's not like, a mile. We're talking hundreds of miles.
Yes, hundreds of miles.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, Rick, we should probably wrap it up for the sake of our listeners, even though we could probably talk forever.
I have more questions. We'll have to do a part 2.
We can. That would be awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's do a part 2 because I'm going through my questions. I'm like, oh yeah.
I know. I have a bunch more as well. So Well, this was fun though.
Yeah. I enjoyed it. Let's definitely a to be determined part 2 should be in the works.
Okay.
So let's make that happen.
We'll put our listeners, write a comment if there's something specific you want us to talk about.
Oh, yeah, that's a really good idea.
That can help hone our conversation.
Yeah. Well, let's help bridge the gap between nature-based solutions and business. I think that's the future.
I think so too. Well, maybe this is a regularly occurring collab we have. I would enjoy that.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. Well, thanks for doing this, Liz.
Thanks for doing it with me. It was fun to be interviewer and interviewee at the same time.
we have not done this before. That may be very obvious when you listen to this. I'm not sure, but I think it turned out okay.
I think we did pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, special thanks to Elizabeth for everything that she and the Nature Conservancy are doing to protect nature and make our communities more resilient. If you'd like to listen to more episodes of Conversing with Nature, please visit naturebasedexchange.org for more information and more episodes. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to head over to emergerstrategies.com for all of your sustainability consulting needs. And don't forget to check out our new service, Nature Strategy and Science-Based Targets for Nature. Cheers.